The grand hall of Baron Krefthal's estate shimmered with crystalline walls that caught and refracted the light of 3 distant suns. Captain Trevor Wade stood before the towering alien noble, his uniform crisp despite the long journey to this remote HFY colony world. The negotiations had been going poorly for weeks, and Wade could feel the tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Baron Krefthal was an imposing figure, even by HFY standards. His chitinous body gleamed with the deep purple hue that marked high nobility among his people. When he spoke, his voice created harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate with meaning. The HFY language was not just sound but a complex weaving of tones that could express dozens of emotions and concepts simultaneously. Wade's translator implant struggled to keep up, reducing the Baron's elaborate speech into flat, simple words. "You humans persist in your demands like insects gnawing at wood," the Baron said, his harmonics dripping with contempt. "Your species communicates with grunts and simple noises, yet you presume to negotiate with those who have mastered the true art of voice." Wade kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened. He had dealt with alien prejudice before, but the HFY took pride in their vocal superiority to an almost religious degree. Among their people, the ability to produce complex harmonics determined everything from social status to career prospects. A HFY who could not speak properly was considered less than worthless. "Baron, we simply ask for fair terms on the mining rights," Wade replied calmly. "The mineral deposits on the northern continent would benefit both our peoples. Earth needs the resources and your colony needs the infrastructure we can provide." The Baron's bioluminescent patterns flickered across his carapace in what Wade had learned was the HFY equivalent of a dismissive laugh. It was a secondary form of communication that the HFY themselves considered primitive and beneath their noble class. Only children and the lower castes relied heavily on light patterns to communicate. "Fair terms?" the Baron repeated mockingly. "Perhaps I should offer you a gift to sweeten our discussions. Something befitting your level of civilization." Wade noticed movement in the shadows behind the Baron's elaborate throne. A smaller HFY figure emerged, moving with hesitant steps. She was young, perhaps the equivalent of a human teenager, with the same purple hue as the Baron but marked with intricate silver patterns that suggested noble bloodline. Her bioluminescent patches glowed with what Wade's cultural training identified as anxiety and fear. "This is Lyra, my daughter," the Baron announced, his harmonics now carrying notes of disgust that Wade's translator marked as shame and burden. "She was born defective. No voice. No harmonics. Nothing but silence and those pathetic light patterns that even the servant class has outgrown." Wade felt his stomach turn. He had read about HFY who were born without the specialized vocal structures needed for harmonic speech, but he had not realized how severely they were treated by their own society. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flared across her body in rapid sequences. Wade did not understand the light language, but he could see the complexity in the patterns, the clear intelligence behind them. She was trying to communicate something, but her father completely ignored her. "I offer her to you, Captain Wade," the Baron continued, his harmonics now mocking. "A gift from my house to yours. Perhaps your primitive species will appreciate a companion who communicates at your level. Simple. Voiceless. Adequate for humans, I should think." The insult was clear and deliberate. The Baron was equating humanity's vocal communication with a disability, suggesting that humans and his defective daughter deserved each other. Several of the Baron's courtiers produced harmonics that Wade's translator marked as laughter. Wade looked at Lyra again. Her bioluminescent patterns had changed, now pulsing with what seemed like desperate hope mixed with terror. Her large, multifaceted eyes met his, and in that moment Wade understood. This was not just mockery. This was the Baron disposing of an embarrassment, getting rid of a daughter he considered worthless by packaging the cruelty as diplomacy. "Baron, I cannot accept a person as property," Wade began carefully. "She is not property in the sense you mean," the Baron interrupted. "Among my people, I have the right to arrange her placement as I see fit. She has no voice, therefore no legal standing to object. Consider it an arranged cultural exchange. She goes with you or she remains here in the isolation wing where she has spent most of her life. The choice is yours, but it means nothing to me either way." Wade's mind raced. His diplomatic training screamed at him to refuse, to not get involved in the internal affairs of an alien noble house. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Felix Carson, was watching from the side of the hall with barely concealed alarm, subtly shaking his head. But Wade could not stop looking at Lyra's light patterns. He had spent 3 months on this world learning basic HFY customs, and he had picked up fragments of the bioluminescent language from watching lower caste workers. The patterns Lyra was producing were not random. They were structured, complex, almost like sentences. She was saying something. She was begging. If Lyra agrees to accompany me, and this is done with proper legal documentation showing this is her choice as much as possible given her circumstances, then I will accept your offer, Wade said quietly. The Baron's harmonics surged with triumph. He had managed to insult the humans and rid himself of his shameful daughter in one move. Excellent. My staff will prepare the documents. She's yours, Captain. May you find her less disappointing than I have. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns exploded with light, cycling through colors Wade had never seen a HFY produce. His translator gave up trying to interpret the emotional content, simply marking it as extreme emotional response, classification uncertain. An hour later, Wade walked through the crystalline corridors with Lyra following 3 steps behind him, as HFY custom dictated for one of lower status. She carried a small bag containing her few possessions. Felix fell into step beside Wade, his expression troubled. Sir, with respect, this could become a diplomatic nightmare, Felix muttered. Taking a noble's daughter, even a disowned one, could be interpreted as. I know exactly how it could be interpreted, Wade cut him off. But did you see her, Felix? Did you see those light patterns? She's intelligent. She's aware. And that monster was keeping her locked away like she was something to be ashamed of. We don't know anything about her needs, her biology, how to care for her. Then we will learn, Wade said firmly. We have xenobiologists on the ship. We have cultural specialists. And more importantly, we have basic human decency. They reached the landing platform where Wade's shuttle waited. Lyra stopped at the base of the ramp, her patterns flickering with uncertainty. Wade turned to face her and for the first time addressed her directly. Lyra, I do not know if you can understand me, and I apologize that I cannot read your light language yet. But I promise you this, on my ship, you will be treated with respect. You will not be locked away. You will not be treated as defective. I do not know what the future holds, but it has to be better than what you are leaving behind. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a soft, steady blue glow. Wade's translator offered no interpretation, but something in his gut told him it meant hope. She walked up the ramp into the shuttle and Wade followed, wondering what he had just set in motion. The research vessel Horizon drifted in quiet orbit above the HFY colony world, its corridors humming with the familiar sounds of a working ship. Captain Trevor Wade stood outside the guest quarters he had assigned to Lyra, hesitating before pressing the door chime. 3 days had passed since they left the Baron's estate, and Lyra had barely emerged from her room. When the door slid open, Wade found Lyra sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by data tablets displaying information about human culture, language, and customs. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly as she absorbed the material, her multifaceted eyes moving across multiple screens simultaneously. May I come in? Wade asked gently. Lyra's patterns shifted to what Wade was beginning to recognize as acceptance, a soft green pulse across her carapace. She gestured to the space across from her with one of her 4 delicate arms. Wade sat down, placing his own tablet between them. I have been studying, he said, activating the screen. Your light language. The bioluminescent communication. I found some old HFY texts that lower caste workers used before the nobility banned them from formal education. Lyra's patterns exploded with surprise, bright yellow and orange flashing across her body. She leaned forward, her entire posture changing from withdrawn to intensely focused. I am not very good yet, Wade admitted, attempting to activate the light-emitting band he had strapped to his arm. It produced a clumsy, stuttering pattern that roughly translated to hello and friend, though he suspected his grammar was terrible. For the first time since boarding the ship, Lyra's patterns formed what could only be described as laughter, a rippling cascade of soft colors that reminded Wade of sunlight on water. She reached out and gently adjusted the settings on his light band, then produced a slow, deliberate pattern of her own. Wade's tablet translated, Your accent is awful, but you are trying. No one has tried before. Something tight in Wade's chest loosened. Will you teach me properly? He asked. Lyra's response was immediate and enthusiastic, her patterns brightening with eagerness. Over the following weeks, the ship's routine transformed around Lyra's presence. Wade spent his early mornings learning bioluminescent communication, though he quickly realized the limitations of his human-made light bands. Lyra could produce hundreds of distinct colors and patterns simultaneously across different parts of her body, creating what amounted to entire paragraphs in seconds. Wade's clumsy single-band attempts were like speaking in broken sentences, but Lyra never showed impatience. One evening, Wade brought Lieutenant Felix Carson and Chief Science Officer Dr. Paula Grant to meet with Lyra properly. Paula carried a tablet loaded with information about human sign language. "It occurred to me," Paula said, sitting across from Lyra, "that humans also have people who cannot speak with their voices. We developed other ways to communicate." She began demonstrating basic signs, her hands moving in simple, clear patterns. "Hello, friend. Welcome." Lyra watched with fascination, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with interest. Within minutes, she was copying the signs, her forearms allowing her to produce combinations that no human could manage. Within an hour, she was asking questions through a combination of signs and light patterns. "She is incredibly fast," Paula breathed, amazed. "I have never seen anyone pick up sign language this quickly." By the end of the week, Lyra had progressed to written English. Wade found her in the ship's library one morning, surrounded by books and tablets, her multiple arms moving between different texts as she compared writing styles and vocabulary. When she noticed Wade, she picked up a stylus and wrote in careful letters on a tablet. "Human languages are beautiful. So many words for the same feeling. Zichterii harmonics only have one word for sadness. You have dozens." Wade smiled. "We are an emotional species. We need all those words." Lyra wrote again, "My father said emotions make you weak. Is that true?" "No," Wade said firmly. "Emotions make us human. They make us care about each other. About justice. About you." Lyra's bioluminescent patterns shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, warm blue. She wrote, "Thank you for caring." The breakthrough came during a routine xenobiology survey. The Horizon was cataloging mineral samples from an asteroid field when Lyra asked to observe the lab work. Dr. Paula Grant hesitated, unsure if it was appropriate, but Wade encouraged her to let Lyra participate. Within the first hour, Lyra noticed something the human scientists had missed. Her bioluminescent patterns flared urgently, and she quickly signed to Paula, pointing at a sample under the electron microscope. Paula looked, frowned, and adjusted the magnification. Her eyes widened. "There are crystalline structures in this sample that our scanners completely missed. They are so small that they barely register, but they are there." Lyra signed rapidly, and Paula's assistant, Tom Fletcher, translated as best he could. "She says the Zichterii can sense certain crystalline formations through electromagnetic sensitivity. Humans cannot detect them naturally, but she can feel them even from here." Paula looked at Lyra with new respect. "Can you identify which samples have these structures?" For the next 3 hours, Lyra worked alongside the science team, her unique sensory abilities revealing details that human instruments struggled to detect. She identified mineral compositions, sorted samples with remarkable precision, and even suggested new testing methods by combining her knowledge of Zichterii science with what she was learning about human approaches. When the shift ended, Paula found Wade in his ready room. "Captain Lyra is brilliant. Not just intelligent but genuinely gifted. She understands xenobiology at a level that some of my officers with advanced degrees cannot match. Her people wasted her potential because she could not speak their precious harmonics." Wade leaned back in his chair, a sad smile on his face. Her father called her defective. He never looked beyond her voice to see her mind. "Their loss is our gain," Paula said firmly. "I want her working with my team permanently if she is willing." Lyra was more than willing. She began spending her days in the xenobiology lab, her nights studying human science and culture, and her spare moments teaching Wade and others her bioluminescent language. The crew, initially uncertain about the alien in their midst, quickly grew fond of her. Tom Fletcher started bringing her music files, discovering that while Lyra could not hear in the same range as humans, she could feel vibrations and interpret them as a form of beauty. She particularly loved bass-heavy music, pressing her hands against speakers to feel the rhythms pulse through her body. Engineer Sarah Mills taught Lyra chess, fascinated by how her multiple arms allowed her to consider multiple moves simultaneously. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Alan Ross worked with Lyra to understand Zichterii biology better, treating her not as a specimen but as a colleague who could provide insights into her own species. One night, 3 months after Lyra had joined the ship, Wade found her on the observation deck, watching the stars drift past. He sat beside her, and they remained in comfortable silence for a while. Finally Lyra signed, "On my father's world I was nothing. Here I am someone." Wade placed his light band between them and produced the pattern he had practiced for weeks. Here, you are family. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns blazed with colors Wade had learned meant joy, gratitude, and belonging. She reached out with one hand and gently touched his, a gesture she had learned from observing human friendship. No words were needed, in any language, to express what that moment meant. The xenobiology lab aboard the Horizon hummed with quiet activity as Lyra examined soil samples from her homeworld. Dr. Paula Grant had requested a routine analysis of environmental specimens collected during their recent diplomatic mission, and Lyra had volunteered to help. Her 4 arms worked in perfect coordination, manipulating slides under various microscopes while her bioluminescent patterns flickered with concentration. She had been working for 2 hours when something caught her attention. A particular sample from the gardens of her father's estate showed unusual microbial activity. Lyra's patterns flashed bright orange with excitement as she increased the magnification. "Paula, come look at this," she signed urgently. Dr. Grant crossed the lab and peered into the microscope Lyra indicated. She saw thousands of tiny organisms, moving in coordinated waves through the soil sample. They were unlike anything in the standard Zhterrii biological database. "What am I looking at?" Paula asked. Lyra's hands moved rapidly in sign language while her bioluminescent patterns pulsed with growing realization. "I do not know. These microorganisms are everywhere in the soil samples from Zhterrii worlds, but they are not listed in any of the scientific records I studied. It is like they are invisible to my people." "Perhaps they are so common that the Zhterrii do not think to study them," Paula suggested. "Like how humans rarely study the most common bacteria in our own soil because they seem unremarkable." But Lyra was not satisfied with that explanation. Over the next several days she dove deeper into the analysis, often working late into the ship's night cycle. She cross-referenced the microorganisms with Zhterrii biological data, medical records, and even ancient texts she found in the ship's xenological archives. Captain Trevor Wade found her in the lab at 3 in the morning, surrounded by holographic displays showing complex molecular structures. Her bioluminescent patterns were cycling through colors so rapidly that they created an almost strobing effect. "Lyra, you should rest," Wade said gently. She turned to him, and even without understanding every nuance of her light language, Wade could see she was trembling with excitement or fear or both. Her hands flew through signs. "I found something. Something important. Something that changes everything." Wade pulled up a chair. "Show me." Lyra activated a holographic display showing the microorganism she had discovered. "This organism lives in the soil, in the water, in the air of every Zhterrii world. I found references to it in medical scans of healthy Zhterrii, living inside their vocal structures." She pulled up another image, this one showing the complex internal anatomy of Zhterrii vocal organs. The same microorganisms were visible, clustered in dense colonies along specialized tissue. "These organisms are symbiotic," Lyra signed, her movements sharp with intensity. "They live in Zhterrii vocal cords. They respond to neural impulses and help produce the harmonic frequencies that make our speech possible. Without them, a Zhterrii cannot create harmonics. Without them, a Zhterrii cannot speak." Wade leaned forward, his mind racing through the implications. "Are you saying these microorganisms are necessary for Zhterrii speech? That it is not purely biological?" "Yes," Lyra sighed. "The Zhterrii do not know this. We have always assumed harmonic speech was purely genetic. But it is not. It is a partnership between Zhterrii biology and these organisms. They colonize our vocal structures when we are infants, transmitted through the environment." Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to a deep, painful purple. "I was kept isolated as an infant because my family was ashamed of me. I was not exposed to the gardens, the soil, the normal environment. I never received the microorganisms. That is why I cannot speak. Not because I am defective. Because I was denied the chance." Wade felt anger rising in his chest, anger at a society that had condemned a child for a condition they themselves had created through isolation and shame. But before he could respond, Lyra continued signing. "If this is true, if these organisms can be introduced to Zhterrii vocal structures after infancy, then maybe I could speak. Maybe I could have the voice I was denied." The next morning, Wade called an emergency meeting with Dr. Paula Grant and Chief Medical Officer Dr. Alan Ross. Lyra presented her findings, her signs translated by the ship's computer while her bioluminescent patterns emphasized key points. Paula examined the data with growing amazement. "This is revolutionary. If you are correct, Lyra, you have discovered the true nature of Zhterrii communication. This should be published, shared with the scientific community. But first, we need to know if adult colonization is possible, Alan said carefully. He looked at Lyra with concern. That is what you want to know, is it not? Can these organisms be introduced to your vocal structures now, after all these years? Lyra's patterns flickered with uncertainty, but she signed, yes. That is what I need to know. The medical team spent 2 weeks running simulations and analyzing Lyra's biology. The news was both hopeful and frightening. Dr. Alan Ross explained the findings to Lyra in the privacy of the medical bay, with Wade present for support. The organisms can theoretically colonize adult Zhiterii vocal structures, Alan said slowly. But the process would be difficult. Your body might reject them as foreign invaders. The colonization process in infants takes months and happens gradually. In an adult, we would need to accelerate it, which means more risk. What kind of risk? Wade asked. Pain, certainly. Possible damage to the vocal structures if her immune system attacks the organisms. In the worst case, permanent damage that could affect her breathing or ability to eat. There is also the psychological aspect. These organisms integrate with neural pathways. Introducing them to an adult brain might cause disorientation, sensory overload, or other neurological effects we cannot predict. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns had gone very still, showing only a faint, neutral gray. She signed slowly, what is the chance of success? Alan hesitated. Honestly? I cannot give you a number. This has never been attempted. You would be the first. That night, Lyra sat alone in her quarters, staring at her reflection in the darkened viewport. She could see the stars beyond, could see her own face reflected against the infinite black. Her hands moved through signs that no one was there to read, a conversation with herself. Wade found her there an hour later. He sat beside her without speaking, waiting. Finally Lyra's hands moved. I do not know who I am anymore. For my whole life I believed I was broken. Defective. Less than a real Zhiterii. Now I learned that I was only denied something that should have been mine from birth. You were never broken, Wade signed back, his movements clumsy but sincere. But what if I could be whole? Lyra's patterns flashed with anguish. What if I could speak like my people speak? What if I could have the voice that was stolen from me? Should I not try? That is not the question, Wade signed. The question is whether you want to try. Not for your father. Not to prove something to the Zhiterii who rejected you. For yourself. Lyra's patterns cycled through dozens of colors as she wrestled with the decision. I am afraid, she finally signed. Afraid of the pain. Afraid of failure. But I am also afraid of never knowing. Of always wondering what I could have been. Wade placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Whatever you decide, we are with you. You are not alone in this. Lyra looked at her reflection again, at the person she had become over these months aboard the Horizon. She had found family, purpose, and value in her silence. But deep inside, in a place she rarely examined, there was still a voice crying to be heard. I want to try, she signed, her patterns solidifying into determined blue. I want to know what my voice sounds like. The communication came through official diplomatic channels 3 weeks after Lyra made her decision to undergo the procedure. Captain Trevor Wade sat in his ready room, reading the message with growing disbelief and anger. Baron Krefthal had filed a formal complaint with the Galactic Council, accusing humanity of kidnapping his daughter and exploiting her disability for their own purposes. Wade's fingers tightened on the tablet as he read the Baron's carefully constructed lies. According to the complaint, Lyra had been taken against her will, manipulated by humans who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. The Baron claimed he had been searching desperately for his beloved daughter, worried sick about her well-being. He painted himself as a devoted father and humans as predators who targeted the weakest members of alien societies. Lieutenant Felix Carson entered the ready room, his expression grim. Sir, it gets worse. The Baron has been giving interviews to news networks across 3 systems. He is calling for sanctions against Earth. Several Zhiterii colony worlds are threatening to cut trade agreements. Wade slammed the tablet down on his desk. That hypocrite threw his own daughter away like garbage. Now he is using her to start a political crusade. He is very convincing, sir. To the Zhiterii public, a voiceless child is tragic. They see Lyra as a victim, and the Baron has positioned himself as her defender. The fact that we actually have her aboard this ship is being twisted into proof of kidnapping. Wade stood and paced across the room. We have the legal documents. We have proof that the Baron offered her to me, that this was his choice. Documents can be forged, he claims. And who will the Zhiterii believe? their own nobility or the humans they already distrust. Wade stopped pacing and looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Does Lyra know? Not yet. She is in medical prep for the procedure. Dr. Allen wants to begin the colonization process tomorrow. Wade closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on him. I need to tell her. She deserves to know what is happening. He found Lyra in the medical bay, lying on a diagnostic bed while Dr. Paula Grant ran final scans of her vocal structures. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns were calm, showing a peaceful blue-green that Wade had learned meant she was at peace with her choice. When she saw Wade's face, her patterns immediately shifted to concerned orange. She sat up and signed, "What is wrong?" Wade pulled up a chair and showed her the tablet with her father's accusations. He watched as her patterns cycled through shock, hurt, and finally settling into something that looked like cold fury. Her hands moved in sharp, angry signs. He dares to call himself my father? He dares to claim he cares? Her patterns flashed red, a color Wade had rarely seen from her. He wants to use me as a weapon against you. Against all of you who showed me more kindness in 3 months than he showed in my entire life. Lyra, we can fight this, Wade said. We can present our case to the Galactic Council. We can show them the truth. But there is another option. He hesitated, hating what he was about to offer. I can take you back. We can return you to your father, clear all of this up, save the diplomatic agreements. It would solve everything politically. Lyra's patterns went completely dark for 3 full seconds, a reaction Wade had never witnessed before. When the light returned, it was steady and determined, a brilliant white that seemed to illuminate the entire medical bay. She signed with movements so forceful they were almost violent. I will never go back to that prison. I will never return to being nothing. If my father wants to use me as a political tool, let him try. But I will not cooperate with his lies. Wade felt relief and pride wash over him. Then we fight. No, Lyra signed, her patterns shifting to resolute gold. I fight. Through the procedure. Through the pain. And when I can speak, I will tell the truth in a voice no one can ignore. Not even the Baron. Dr. Paula entered with Dr. Allen, both carrying equipment for the procedure. Lyra, we need to begin soon if we are going to proceed. But given the political situation, no one would blame you if you wanted to postpone. Lyra's response was immediate. She signed, we begin now. My father thinks I am weak, broken, something to be pitied or used. I will show him and everyone else that I was never broken. I was only denied opportunity. Today I take that opportunity back. The procedure began the next morning. Dr. Allen had cultivated the symbiotic microorganisms in a specialized solution that would be gradually introduced to Lyra's vocal structures through a series of treatments. The process would take weeks, and each treatment would be painful as the organisms colonized tissue that had never hosted them before. Wade was there for the first treatment. He held Lyra's hand as Dr. Allen administered the solution directly into her vocal cords through a fine needle. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns exploded with colors that pulsed in time with waves of pain. Her body trembled, and her grip on Wade's hand tightened until he thought his bones might crack. But she did not pull away. She did not ask them to stop. You are doing wonderfully, Paula said, monitoring the readings. The organisms are beginning to attach. Your immune system is reacting but not rejecting them outright. This is good, Lyra. This is very good. The treatment lasted 20 minutes, but to Wade it felt like hours. When it was finally over, Lyra collapsed back onto the bed, her patterns flickering weakly. She was too exhausted to sign, but her hand remained in Wade's, holding on like an anchor. The treatments continued every 3 days. Between sessions, Lyra suffered through waves of pain and discomfort as the organisms spread through her vocal structures. Her throat felt like it was on fire. She could barely eat. Sleep came only in brief, restless intervals. But the crew rallied around her. Tom Fletcher brought her ice chips and cold drinks that soothed her burning throat. Sarah Mills sat with her for hours, reading aloud from books because Lyra found the sound of human voices comforting. Felix brought reports of their diplomatic efforts, showing her that they were fighting for her even as she fought for herself. Wade visited every day, often multiple times. He continued practicing bioluminescent communication with her, improving his skills until he could have actual conversations without relying entirely on translators. They talked about everything and nothing, about science and philosophy, about fears and hopes. One night, 2 weeks into the treatment, Lyra's patterns formed a question Wade had been dreading. What if I fail? What if after all this pain I still cannot speak? Wade took a long moment before responding with his light band, carefully forming each pattern. then you will still be Lyra. Still brilliant. Still valued. Still family. The voice does not make you who you are. Lyra's patterns shimmered with emotion. She signed weakly, but I want it anyway. Is that wrong? No, Wade signed back. Wanting something that was stolen from you is not wrong. Fighting to reclaim it is not wrong. You are not doing this to please your father or to fit into HFY society. You are doing this for yourself. That makes all the difference. After the fourth treatment, Dr. Allen reported that the colonization was progressing better than expected. The organisms had spread throughout 60% of Lyra's vocal structures and were beginning to integrate with her neural pathways. But the integration was causing new problems. Lyra began experiencing strange sensations, phantom sounds that she could not quite hear, vibrations in her throat that had no source. Your brain is learning to process new signals, Paula explained. The organisms communicate with neural tissue in ways your brain has never experienced before. It is like learning a new sense. It will be confusing until your mind adapts. The confusion sometimes frightened Lyra, but she pushed through it. She meditated, practiced breathing exercises that Dr. Allen taught her, and focused on the support surrounding her. During the sixth treatment, something changed. As the solution entered her vocal cords, Lyra felt a vibration that was different from all the others. It resonated through her entire body, a sensation both foreign and somehow deeply right. Her bioluminescent patterns erupted with surprise and wonder. Dr. Paula's instruments picked up the change immediately. Lyra, I am reading harmonic frequencies. Very faint, but they are there. The organisms are producing harmonics in response to your neural impulses. Lyra tried to focus on the sensation, tried to understand it. She could not hear the sound herself, not the way HFY with normal hearing could, but she could feel it. The vibrations were becoming part of her, extensions of her own thoughts and emotions. Wade watched as tears formed in Lyra's multifaceted eyes, something he had never seen from his HFY before. Her hand found his again, squeezing gently. She was finding her voice. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive dome of transparent alloy that offered a view of the stars beyond. Representatives from 40 different species sat in concentric circles, their translation devices humming softly as they converted hundreds of languages into comprehensible speech. At the center of it all stood Baron Krefthal, his purple carapace gleaming under the chamber's lights, his harmonics resonating with righteous anger. For 3 months, my daughter has been held captive by these humans, the Baron proclaimed, his voice creating waves of sound that made the air shimmer. They took advantage of her disability, her vulnerability, and used her for their own purposes. I demand her immediate return and full sanctions against Earth for this crime against a helpless child. Captain Trevor Wade sat in the human delegation section, his jaw tight with controlled fury. Beside him sat Lieutenant Felix Carson and Dr. Paula Grant, both looking equally tense. The past week had been a whirlwind of legal preparations, testimony gathering, and diplomatic maneuvering. The Baron had public opinion on his side. The image of a devoted father searching for his disabled daughter was powerful, and many in the council seemed sympathetic to his claims. The council arbiter, a towering crystalline being named Thresh, spoke in a voice that resonated through everyone's translation implants. Baron Krefthal, you have made serious accusations. The human delegation has requested the opportunity to present their defense. Do you object? I object to nothing except further delays in my daughter's return, the Baron said smoothly. Let them speak their lies. The truth is clear. Thresh turned toward the human section. Captain Wade, you may present your case. Wade stood, his heart pounding. Everything they had worked for, everything Lyra had endured, came down to this moment. Honored council members, I request permission to call a witness who can speak to the truth of these matters better than anyone else present. What witness? The Baron demanded, his harmonics sharp with suspicion. The chamber doors opened and Lyra entered. She wore traditional HFY formal robes, silver and purple fabric that marked her noble bloodline. Her bioluminescent patterns were calm and steady, showing confidence that made her seem to glow from within. She walked with her head high, her 4 arms held in a posture of dignity that Wade had helped her practice. The Baron's harmonics stuttered with shock. Lyra? What is the meaning of this theatrics? Come here, child. We are taking you home. Lyra stopped in the center of the chamber, equidistant from her father and the human delegation. She looked at the Baron, and her bioluminescent patterns flickered with something that might have been sadness or might have been pity. Then she opened her mouth and sang. The sound that emerged was unlike anything most in the chamber had ever heard. It was pure HFY harmonics, complex and layered, carrying emotions and meaning in ways that simple words never could. The frequencies wove together in perfect mathematical precision, creating a voice that resonated through the entire dome. Every Zhtarii in the chamber froze. The Baron's own harmonics cut off mid-frequency, his body going rigid with shock. It was impossible. His voiceless daughter, his defective child, was speaking in perfect harmonics. Not just speaking, but creating sounds of such clarity and precision that even trained Zhtarii orators would envy them. "My name is Lyra, daughter of Baron Krefthal," she said in harmonics, her voice steady despite the years of silence that had preceded this moment. "And I stand before you today not as a victim, but as evidence of a truth that will change our understanding of Zhtarii biology forever." The translations rippled through the chamber as other species struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. Lyra continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I was not kidnapped by humans. I was discarded by my father. Given away in mockery because I could not speak, because I was considered broken and worthless. Baron Krefthal offered me to Captain Wade as an insult, never expecting anyone to value a voiceless Zhtarii." The Baron's harmonics finally returned, harsh and defensive. "Lies. She was taken from me. This voice is some human trick, some technology." "No trick," Lyra interrupted, her harmonics cutting through his like a blade through silk. "I will explain exactly how I gained this voice, and in doing so, I will reveal a truth that the Zhtarii have been blind to for generations." She activated a holographic display that Paula had prepared, showing the microscopic organisms that lived in Zhtarii vocal structures. As she spoke, Lyra explained her discovery in terms that even non-scientists could understand. She detailed how these symbiotic microorganisms were essential for harmonic speech, how they colonized Zhtarii infants through environmental exposure, and how her own isolation as a child had prevented her from receiving them. "I was not born defective," Lyra said, her harmonics carrying waves of controlled emotion. "I was made voiceless by shame and isolation. And I am not alone. Across Zhtarii worlds, there are thousands of children labeled as broken, locked away, hidden from society because they cannot speak. But they are not broken. They are denied." Dr. Paula Grant stood and added her testimony, presenting the scientific data that supported Lyra's claims. She explained the experimental procedure that had allowed adult colonization, the risks Lyra had taken, and the implications for other voiceless Zhtarii. The Baron's harmonics grew increasingly desperate. "Even if this is true, it changes nothing. She is my daughter. She belongs with her people, not with humans who have poisoned her mind against her own kind." Lyra turned to face her father directly. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of such profound sadness that several Zhtarii in the audience visibly trembled. "You are right that I am Zhtarii," she said. "But you stopped being my father the day you looked at your voiceless child and saw only shame. Captain Wade and his crew are my family now. They saw value where you saw defect. They saw potential where you saw burden. They gave me the tools to find my voice while you locked me away in silence." She paused, then shifted to sign language while simultaneously speaking in harmonics, her forearms moving gracefully through the gestures. "I have learned that communication takes many forms. Voice is not the only measure of worth. And I will spend the rest of my life proving this to anyone who needs to hear it." Arbiter Thresh leaned forward, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. "Lyra, what do you wish? The Council will not force you to return if you do not wish it, but we must hear your choice clearly." Lyra's bioluminescent patterns blazed with determination. "I choose to remain with Captain Wade and the crew of the Horizon. But I also choose to help my people. I am establishing a foundation to research and treat voiceless Zhtarii children. I will work between human and Zhtarii space, bringing together the best of both our sciences to help those who were denied as I was." She looked at the assembled council members, her voice ringing clear. "I propose new protocols for treating communication disabilities across all species. No child should be locked away for being different. No person should be considered worthless because they cannot speak in the way their society expects." The voting took less than an hour. The council ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the humans, dismissing the Baron's accusations and formally recognizing Lyra's right to choose her own path. They approved funding for her foundation and established new guidelines for how member species should treat individuals with communication differences. Baron Krefthal sat in stunned silence as the votes were tallied. His political maneuver had backfired spectacularly. Instead of painting humans as villains, he had exposed his own cruelty and ignorance. As the chamber began to empty, Lyra approached her father one final time. Wade moved to follow her, but she gestured for him to wait. This was something she needed to do alone. She stood before the Baron, looking up at the figure who had loomed over her childhood like a shadow of disapproval. When she spoke, her harmonics were gentle, almost kind. "I do not hate you, father," she said. "I pity you. You had a brilliant daughter and you never knew her. You could have had my love, my loyalty, my devotion. Instead you have your pride and your shame. I hope someday you realize what you lost." The Baron's harmonics trembled, searching for words that would not come. For the first time in his life he seemed at a loss for speech. Lyra turned away and walked back to where Wade and the crew waited. As she reached them, she switched to sign language, her patterns glowing warm blue. "Take me home," she signed. "To the horizon." 6 months later, the Lyra Foundation had centers on 12 worlds. Voiceless Zhtarii children were receiving treatment, learning alternative communication methods, and being given the tools to find their own voices, whether harmonic, signed, written, or expressed through light. Lyra split her time between the Foundation and the Horizon, working with Wade's crew on new xenological research. She had become a symbol of hope across multiple species, proof that disability was often just opportunity denied, and that with the right support, anyone could find their voice. And when she spoke, whether in harmonics or signs or bioluminescent patterns, the galaxy listened.